Right, and I think many of us tend to agree with you that even if Ron Paul becomes president, that could be what happens. I think where I'd argue a little bit with you is that for Obama or anybody else to be in when the collapse happens is just going to give the powers that be the right puppet to introduce a fake solution, which might be getting us involved in a one world government or a one world currency or some other bogus solution, in the problem reaction solution genre that leaves us even more screwed than had Ron Paul been there to stand up for the Constitution and make constitutionally principled choices, as we know he will. Let me ask you this, because so many of us are a little bit freaked out about this criminal government and the NDAA. You make a point that it's important for people to get a second passport, and why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Is that really difficult to do, and where do you live? Are you in Canada?
No, I was born in Canada. I currently live in Mexico, although I'm not a resident here because I follow basically the permanent traveler or the permanent tourist motto or the way of living. And that's basically you want to live in a country where you're not even a resident or a citizen. You want to just be a tourist because governments always treat tourists the best. They treat their own citizens as tax slaves and do what they want with them. So I live here as a tourist. I'm a resident of the Dominican Republic. And I also am getting my passport there. I'm getting that this year in the Dominican Republic. And I'm still keeping my Canadian passport, but just as a travel document, really. And I have no attachment to Canada at all anymore. And the reason that I actually suggest that people get a second passport, and it's especially for Americans, at no other time in history has anyone needed a foreign passport more than Americans need one right now. And the reason is the U.S. government is shutting off all angles for Americans to put their assets outside of the U.S. There's hardly any stock brokerage in the world who will accept American clients. They'll accept any client in the world. They'll accept North Koreans. They'll accept Cubans or Venezuelans, whoever you want, but they will not accept Americans. And that's because the American government has gone around the world and told them, if you accept Americans, we're going to make your life hell. We're basically going to shut you down. And that's what they've done. That's why they've been able to turn over some stuff in Switzerland and try to open up what's been a long bastion of banking privacy. They've opened that up somewhat just through threats. And so as Americans, it's really important to get a second passport at this time because I'm predicting in the next few years they will actually make it illegal to get a foreign passport. So get one now. And also it's also important because there's so many laws now in the U.S. that there's actually a stat that under 25-year-old people, 33% of them have been arrested at one point or another. So if they have a criminal record, that's one-third of the population right there that will not be able to get a second passport because most countries want a clean criminal record when you apply for a passport. And so there's so many ways to be arrested and to get a criminal record in the U.S. now. If you have 4 beers and you drive, that would be a DUI. That's a criminal record. If you have a little vegetation in your pocket called marijuana, which is a healthy healing plant, that's a criminal record. There's millions of ways. If you grow raw milk or if you have raw milk or if you open a lemonade stand without a license, that's a criminal record. So it's really important to use this time. I think we've got a little bit of time left. I'm not sure how long. I know it's definitely getting close to the end for Americans to do these sort of things, but use this time to get a second passport. And it is quite easy. There's different countries. We actually offer a service in the Dominican Republic to help people get passports. It takes about 3 years and a total cost of under $10,000, and you can get a passport there. And that's a great country to have a passport. It's a very free country, and there's not much government involvement at all in that country, and it's a very nice place. And that sort of thing. So that's what we definitely recommend.
Well, that's really interesting information, Jeff. I think it would surprise most people to know that getting a second passport could cost $10,000. I mean, that's a lot of money, and most folks are probably worried that we don't have 3 more years. What are the top couple of countries that you would recommend? You said Dominican Republic. Are there any others? Can it be any easier than $10,000 in 3 years? I mean, any other tips you can give us?
Yes, it can. There's many different ways to get a foreign passport. One way is through just your family heritage. There's many countries, mostly in Europe, Italy, Ireland, Israel, of course, and many others, that if you if that's where your family's from and it's been within the last few generations that someone, your grandfather, your parents have lived there, you can apply for a second passport there. Now, European passports are okay right now. They're not going to be the best passports to hold in the future as well, because Europe's headed the same way as the U.S. But at least it gives you an option. Europe might not be as bad as the U.S. for the next few years, and maybe they won't institute capital controls on their citizens and that sort of thing. So definitely, there's many different ways. And just to let you know, the $10,000, that's spread out over the 3 years. So, for example, for the first year, you get your provisional residency. That costs about under $3,000, and then the next time you get your permanent residency, that's about $2,500, and then to get your passport in the third year is about $5,000. So it is split up, but I do understand for some people that won't make sense. There's one other option. It's actually a free option. It's called a world passport, and it's you can look it up on the internet, and it's quite well known. It's been around for a long time, and it's actually been accepted by many countries as a travel document. And all you have to do is send in, I believe it's $30 or $40, and at least that gives you a backup plan if all else fails. Now, you probably won't be able to open a brokerage account or a bank account with it, although you might be able to. You can give it a try. But at least it gives you another option if things get really bad.
Well, you're an interesting guy, and, I think I would do us a disservice if I didn't ask you how you became the dollar vigilante. Our good friend SJB alerted me to this, and I think I had heard this story. I think I read this years ago. I really think that I did, because I remember you buying a boat and the boat sinking.
Well, I don't know if the boat sinking made me into the dollar vigilante, but basically, to give you my background, I was born in Canada. I was always a computer nerd, so when the internet first came out, I was super excited because I've been waiting my whole life for that, and I basically got on it, and I started what's still to this day Canada's largest financial website called stockhouse.com, and through that I went through the whole tech bubble and the collapse, and I didn't know what happened, so afterwards I was confused, and I sold the company, and I said, I have to figure out what's going on here, because I had a company that started in my house and went to almost $250 million company, and then it was almost worthless again a few months later. So I got a boat, and I decided I'm going to sail around the world and see the world through my own eyes, not through the lens of the media. And I ended up going to actually only a few countries on the boat. I sank it in El Salvador and clung to my surfboard for a while, and I was saved by some local yachtsmen. And what I did after that is I realized, as soon as I got to the shore, because I was living on the boat, I thought, wow, this is the freest I've ever felt in my life. I really have nothing. I have nowhere to go. Like, do you even walk left or right at that point? And it was really an amazing feeling. So I said, okay, I'm going to buy a backpack, and I'm just going to live out of that backpack for at least a few years and travel completely spontaneously. And that's what I did. And I ended up visiting 100 countries along the way. I ended up making a movie with Jackie Chan in China, and just all sorts of amazing things that you would never happen, and all sorts of education that you could never learn in any school. And through it all, I came upon, like I told you, Doug Casey, and then I learned about libertarianism and anarchism and Austrian economics. Another sort of mentor of mine is a guy named Stephen Seville, who I just did an interview on our site with just yesterday. And so I learned all this sort of stuff. And so it was back then, around 2006, 2007, I really started to figure out what's going on in the world. And then I knew we're towards the end of this fiat currency system, this unbacked fiat currency system. It has no chance of surviving very much longer. And so as soon as that first collapse started to happen in 2008, I thought, okay, I have to do something. I have to get involved in what's going on. I have to help spread information and try to help people to understand what's going on and how to protect themselves and how to profit from it. And so that's when I started the Dollar Vigilante newsletter, which is almost 2 years ago now. And we've basically just been covering all the stuff that we've been talking about, how to protect yourself, mostly from governments and from the collapse. We're still in the collapse, and it will collapse. There's no way to actually salvage the system at this point, and that's good. As I said right off the bat, this is what enables most wars and actually causes most poverty is central banking and then the socialist-style governments, the big governments of the world today. So we're just basically covering that, and I've been doing that and been enjoying it. So it's been a lot of work, but a lot of fun.
I should ask you about gold and silver, too, because many of us are probably larger silver bugs than gold bugs. Those of us that understand the fundamentals of silver and how hard it is to get out of the ground and how it gets used up in fabrication and has so many more uses than gold. Where do you stand? Are you more of a silver guy or a gold guy? How would you recommend people protect themselves these days?
Well, I think you can't go wrong with either one. I think both have good and bad things. For example, I have more gold than silver. However, I do definitely understand that there is massive potential for a huge silver rise, more than the total percentage rise of gold. The chances of gold going to 10,000 is pretty good, but that would be a 4 or 5-fold increase. But the chances of silver staying under $100 is pretty small, actually. I think it'll go much higher than that. So silver should have a higher percentage gain in the long run, just based on what you were just talking about. There's such a shortage of supply of silver, and silver is used in so many things now. I think there's reasons to own both. I think I like to own silver and actually other hard assets, because gold that usually gets picked out by the governments and by the central banks as being the bad guy. So whenever they try to say, some dictator fled the country, they'll say, he took all the gold, and if some dictator's doing something, and they'll say, he's hoarding gold, and they've already confiscated gold in the 1930s, so it's not like this is unheard of sort of stuff. I could totally see a period of time where the government's tried to say that gold ownership is illegal, or they really clamp down on it in one way or another, or tax it at a very large rate, and they might not do that to silver. So that's one good reason to own silver over gold. But at the same time, gold is time-tested money ever since basically human civilization, and it's been the best of the monies, and it is the best money because, unlike silver, it isn't used in a lot of applications. So that's really the best kind of money, is one that isn't used as a commodity, because then it's almost really like true money at that point. So there's reasons to own both, but you can't go wrong holding either one. And the only thing you can do wrong is not hold either and keep yourself in fiat dollars under the control of people like Ben Bernanke, who basically are intent on destroying it.
Yeah, very well said, and we're big advocates of holding these metals in physical form in your own possession. So, Jeff, before we let you go, why don't you tell us about Dollar Vigilante, how people can get over to your great website, and tell them what to look for.
Sure, it's just dollarvigilante.com. If you went to a government school, you might not know how to spell that. It's dollarvigilante.com. And we actually write a daily blog on there, and just click on blog, and we talk about all this sort of stuff every day. Where we actually have a subscription newsletter as well. If you find the information that we're offering is of value, and you want to get more of that kind of information and more actionable info on how you can survive and thrive during the collapse of the fiat currency system, we offer a pay subscription newsletter for $150 a year or $250 a year, just depending on how much information you want. And but the blog is free. So just go ahead and sign right up for our blog right on our front page, and we'll send you almost daily Vigilante thoughts.
Jeff, thanks so much. We really appreciate your time, and we've got you linked up on our links on the right side of our page at Dollar Vigilante, so people can click through real easily. So until we talk again, man, take care.
You too.
Happy 2012.
Same to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching. Good night.